Hey everyone, I'm Mark, and today we're going to be looking at how to manage content in Flight Sim 2024, whether that's the default content that ships with the sim, content you've bought through the marketplace, or even third-party add-ons that you've picked up from other stores. By default, almost everything in Flight Sim is streamed to your PC. It's not installed locally, it downloads the content on demand, and for some of that content, it gets put into a cache or temporary storage, basically. That allows it to keep some of those recently used objects locally on your PC, but they're not installed per se, and both default content and in-sim marketplace content work this way. You've probably seen this effect yourself when you load into a plane for the first time, or even the first time in a while. It can take a few seconds for all of it to render properly because it's re-downloading some of that content back onto your local PC. Now, you can still install and keep some default content locally on a permanent basis. I don't use this feature very much, but it can definitely be useful if you're either limited on bandwidth because it just can't get the data to you fast enough to render the world properly, or you have a download cap per month which you can't exceed. Installed content is downloaded once and is never deleted unless you explicitly do it. But the downside is that you'll need a lot more disk space, especially if you start downloading world updates. So if you're thinking of installing some content locally, let's have a quick look at how we would go about doing that. First, we need to head into the marketplace. And then once that comes up over at the top on the left, we've got the My Library option right here. On the page that's appeared here, you can see a list of all of the handcrafted default airports, all of the planes that you have, and a couple of extra little things here and there. And this is going to cover both your default content and everything you've purchased through the marketplace. And you can see most of them are going to be marked as streamed to your PC. So if we wanted to install this one right here, all we've got to do is click on it. And then at the bottom, we now have the option to click download, and that's going to start downloading all of the assets related to that piece of content. So there is one quirky little thing you need to be aware of because downloading the content locally is actually a two-step process. We've done the first part, which is the download, but there's one other thing we need to do. Once it completes the download, you're going to get a message saying to check your notifications in the top right. If you bring that up, you can click through to go to your downloaded content. And then from there, you can click the item again. And now down at the bottom, you can pick to install it, which is going to go through and activate the content. In theory, you should get a notification when there's an update to content that you've downloaded, but I've also literally just had a case where the P180 was updated, but I never got a notification about it, so you have to keep a closer eye on things when you install them locally. I downloaded a bunch of stuff to prepare for this video, and honestly, if you have a strong internet, say 100 megabits per second or more and no download cap, I wouldn't even bother with installing anything locally. It just doesn't seem to have much of an advantage, even from a performance point of view. The only thing that I can see as being useful is to install planes you use frequently. Like that, it always has all of the assets locally and you don't see that weird loading in behavior that I showed you earlier, which sometimes can happen even when you just come out of the pause menu. The downside is that you have to keep an eye on it for updates now, so there are definitely pros and cons to both approaches, so I guess the answer is it depends. One thing you're probably going to notice looking around in your library is that there are a lot of different types of content. Some of it is going to be 2024 native, others are going to be marked as 2020 add-ons that are compatible with 2024, and you'll even see some 2020 only items that are disabled entirely. 2024 native add-ons are built with Flight Sim 2024's tooling, and they'll often have extra features that take advantage of the base sim's improvements, which is the case for most of the default content and a lot of the marketplace content now as well. 2024 compatible add-ons are technically still Flight Sim 2020 add-ons that have been built with 2020's tooling, but in theory it has been checked and fixed to work in 2024, but these are still going to be tagged as 2020 items in your library, but they should be enabled by default. You'll also find a mix of things that are disabled for different reasons. Let's take the citation 10 here as an example. it's marked as disabled, but that's because there's a 2024 native version of it that is enabled. So the older version is disabled since I don't need it anymore. Another situation that can happen is if you install a third-party add-on, it might disable a default add-on for the same airport, which is what you see here with San Francisco. It's disabled the default SFO that comes with Flight Sim because I bought a third-party scenery for that airport, and if they were both enabled at the same time, you would likely end up having issues with the scenery. That's actually something that you should come check in my library if you are having issues with a scenery that you only have a single version of it enabled at a time. There's also some other add-ons which are just plain disabled permanently, and usually that means there's been a newer version of it that's released, so you need to upgrade, and the old one is just never going to work again. That covers the content that lives inside the sim. Next, we're going to look into the community folder itself, where to find it, how to install add-ons by hand, and how to keep the whole thing organized without it turning into a giant mess. The community folder is where you put any add-on you got from outside the sim, things like scenery or aircraft from stores like Just Flight or Contrail, plus all of the free stuff from the community, which for the most part is all on flightsim.to. Basically, anything that doesn't come from the in-sim marketplace goes into the community folder, and the way it works is simple. Every time the sim starts up, it scans the community folder and it loads whatever it finds in it. Where your community folder lives depends on where you bought Flight Sim, so either from Steam or the Microsoft Store. So I'm going to leave both paths in the description of the video for you, but even then, you could still have some trouble finding it because the AppData folder that it's in is actually marked as hidden by default. If that's happening to you, you'll want to click on View near the top here and then pick Show and Hidden Items, which will let you find the folder even if it's marked as hidden. To make it easy to access it the next time you want to add or remove an add-on, what you can do is go back up one level and then right-click on the community folder itself. And from the context menu, if you pick Pin to Quick Access, it'll make it available with a single click on the left-hand sidebar. And if you look closely, you're actually going to see there are two community folders sitting side by side, Community and Community 2024. And the reason they added that second folder is for people who still run both sims side by side to be able to share add-ons between the two sims. The theory is that you would put your 2020 add-ons in the regular community folder and the 2024 native add-ons in the community 2024 folder. But if you are able to run both sims side by side, I would seriously consider just cutting the cord with 2020 at this point because most add-ons work for 2024 now. If you only have 2024 installed though, just pick one of the two folders, they both work, and for the most part, I feel like everyone still uses the regular community folder rather than Community 2024. Alright, so let's quickly walk through how to download and install an add-on because there are a few little details to be aware of. First, we've got to download it. And for add-ons from flightsim.to, which is the main place most of us get our add-ons, they always come as a zip file once you get it on your PC. Once the download completes, you can then extract the zip file by just right-clicking on it and choosing Extract All, and that'll create a folder alongside the zip file that you just downloaded. The folder it extracts to isn't always the folder you need to move into your community folder though. You need to move the actual folder that contains the files for the add-on. So you're going to want to look into that extracted folder to see what's in it. There's nothing at this level here except another folder. So if we go into that one now, you can see here we have the files for the add-on. So what we're going to want to do is go back up to that folder, cut it from here, and move that across to the community folder. A lot of third-party stores actually make this even easier by giving you an installer instead of a zip. In those cases, you just run the installer, it finds your community folder for you, and it drops everything in the right place automatically. Now, as you accumulate more add-ons, you're going to notice that the sim starts to load a bit slower, and that's because everything that you add in there has to be loaded at startup. And more importantly, it creates a higher risk of conflicts between all of your add-ons, and it could go as far as causing crashes to desktop. For that reason, it's best to keep your add-ons folder as lean as possible, and it's definitely worth doing a pass of what you've got in there regularly to remove stuff that you don't need or use anymore. There's a few different ways that you can handle this, of course, and I think how you approach it really depends on how many add-ons you actually have. I've only got around 100 or so items, and out of those, there's probably only 20 or so that I use regularly. So, what I've done is created a folder alongside the community folder, which I called Community Not Loaded. Add-ons that I don't use frequently, like certain airports or model matching libraries, I'll move those out of the community folder and into my not loaded folder. And since I keep all of it on the same disk, moving it over is really quick, even for a large add-on. There are tools like Add-On Linker that you can use to automate how you move stuff into and out of the community folder, but for the most part, I think it's a little bit overkill unless you're having to move stuff across drives on your PC. In that case, I can definitely see it being a little bit more useful. And one thing worth noting is that even for add-ons that came from an installer, you can still move those files out of the community folder by hand afterwards and only bring them back in when you actually need them. I'll often do this with planes that I have but don't fly frequently, like the Just Flight RJ, which I maybe do one flight every other month or so. I'll move it into my not loaded folder while I'm not using it, and then on the occasions where I do fly it, I'll just bring it back into the community folder. When there's an update to an add-on that gives you an installer, you'll want to move it back into the community folder before you run the new installer for it, but otherwise it all works pretty much the same way. One last quick tip to keep in mind is that if your sim ever starts crashing or acting weirdly, the first troubleshooting step that you should be doing is actually emptying your community folder and testing it again to see if you still have the issue. The easiest way to do that is to rename the community folder to something else, whatever you want to call it, and create a new empty community folder and then just relaunch the sim to see if it fixes your issue. Then from there, you can progressively add things back until you figure out which add-on is causing the conflict, which is a slow process since you have to restart the sim every time you add something back to it, but it's unfortunately the best we can do. Thank you for spending this time with me, and if you learned something useful today, please make sure to like the video and subscribe on your way out.